All the content's there, the consultations, the assessments, how to interpret your results, and all the necessary workshops to start building your plan. Option number 2 is the How to Overcome Lower Back Pain online course and coaching. So you sit down with me for a consultation. After filling out the consultation, the assessment and the initial questionnaire, I then put everything together. We then go through, ask some supplementary questions during the consultation. I take all that information. I then start building your rehab plan, give you 2 weeks of support as well to get it into place, to get you reducing your lower back pain. So if you, as I mentioned, suffer with lower back pain, you've got those 2 options. Just click the link below and you can get yourself enrolled. Before we get stuck into the 3 ways your lower back gets injured, and the 4th way, which is how we then go about rehabbing, couple of principles, as you can see on the screen. Very few back injuries happen from one event. It's normally cumulative, so it builds up over time. The straw breaks the camel's back. What generally happens is the treatment is then centered around one event rather than the build-up. So if it was some random event where you picked a pen up off the floor, that's what the treatment is built around. Unfortunately, because of the cumulative nature, what we have to understand is the other events that contribute to it as well. So we have to find injury mechanisms and pain triggers. If we can find those, we then build the program around that. Then we've got injury occurs when the applied load exceeds the failure tolerance, and we're going to describe this next because I've got 4 graphs. 3 is the injury mechanisms. They come from McGill's low back disorder, but I'm just going to be talking through them with my best understanding of the content. But essentially, they come from that book. So if you do need to look them up and the content, please do go get low back disorder. You can order it off Amazon. It's a great book. It will help you no end. The first way is impact. Now, if you get the low back disorder book, there is an image on there of a snowmobiler getting some air, and then eventually he's going to land. And what the landing means is that point there. And then eventually, as I mentioned before, when the applied load exceeds the failure tolerance, we get the failure. So this is the margin of safety from the first time he gets air and lands, but then he loses that because it repeats and repeats and repeats. Another example I can give, you may have watched, I'm not sure if it was Top Gear or the Grand Tour, but James May was racing Richard Hammond. James May was in a speedboat. Richard Hammond was in a Ferrari Daytona going to Monaco. In the boat, they're going along, they hit some waves going too fast, and you just see him jumping up, slamming into the seat, jump up, slam into the seat, jump up, slam into the seat. That would be this type of mechanism. But it will happen over time. As you can see here, you've got the applied load, obviously the margin of safety that we've talked about, and then the second time the applied load exceeds the failure tolerance and the back fails, and then there's an injury. So the first way is impact. The second way is cumulative trauma. So these are smaller loads, as you can see here, applied over time. And then what starts to happen, instead of it being one and then the second time it fails, you can see it slowly. So all of this time that's gone by, there is no indication that an injury is going to occur. You're just lifting boxes, you're sitting down, you're doing whatever you do in everyday life, going shopping, bending down, picking things up, carrying things around. There's no indication of any failure about to happen, or that margin of safety is sort of larger at the start of the week and then smaller at the end of the week. That's not to say it will take a week. It can take much longer than that. It could take months. It could take years. But the general principle is, as time goes by, this failure tolerance comes down with poor movement, which creates this cumulative type of trauma. And then eventually, again, as mentioned, the applied load, which is here, exceeds the failure tolerance, this is the one event that creates the back injury. So the impact are much bigger impacts, but happen over time. So it's the time it takes is much shorter. This is a more cumulative over weeks, months, potentially years, and then eventually the back fails. So as I mentioned in the first slide, if we're talking about this one event, when we pick the pen up from the floor, we're going to put all of our rehab attention on this event. But if we have this greater understanding about cumulative trauma, what we start to do is try and identify these applied loads, and we can do that through a consultation process, through an assessment process. So we try and identify what these are, and then we build the rehab program around all of them. So we essentially try and eliminate all of these, so this margin of safety stays equal for as long as possible. Finally, number 3, we have sustained load. Now this is where, again, if you look at the low back disorder book, it's of construction workers, and they are essentially just in a bent over position. So it might be a bricklayer laying the first few rows of bricks. So he's just constantly in a bent over position, and that constant bent over position is the applied load. So the applied load just stays there, and again, as you can see, this is time. So this could be 0 to 60 minutes. It could be 2 hours. It could be 8 hours. So they're constantly in this, but again, what's happening is you've got a large margin of safety, but as this applied load accumulates, you start to see the failure tolerance again comes down, and as I mentioned, as the failure tolerance, as the applied load exceeds the failure tolerance, this is where the injury occurs. And again, as I mentioned in the last slide and the previous slide, if we look at this event in isolation, then we're going to think, well, it was just that. Whereas it could be other factors as well. It could be during the day, they're not only in a bent over position, but as they add more rows, they come up into a standing position, but they're sitting involved. They go for an hour's lunch, but there's all these different things that it could be, and it creates a problem. So what we're now going to look at is how to rehab. So number 4, which is how to actually rehab. If you know exercise and you know how to recover tissues, this will be very simple because it's the same principle. So what we do when we are looking to strengthen a muscle, gain endurance within a muscle, develop cardiovascular fitness, so the heart and the lungs, what we do is we apply load. So we need that stress on the tissue for it to create an adaptation. But the adaptation occurs during this rest break, as you can see here. So you've got the tolerance comes down as the load is applied. It's exactly the same in exercise, and it will be exactly the same in low back rehabilitation, core rehabilitation, whatever it is. Because as you can see here, as the rest takes place, we get that upward trajectory, the strengthening, the greater endurance, the greater cardiovascular fitness. That all happens during that resting period. What then happens, the idea, as long as we rest optimally, is it comes back higher than it was previously. So what we've gained is the tolerance to manage with that much more load. So again, we start here, and this pattern essentially continues, so on and so forth. So when it comes to rehabilitation, this is what we need to put in place. When it comes to everyday life, this is also what we need to put in place. So if you can't sit for a long period of time without your back becoming a problem, what we have to do, sitting, is applying a load to your lower back. So we can sit, we can have a sustained load, But then what we need to do is we need to rest those tissues. So we need to get you up, we need to get you moving around and take the stress off those tissues. That will then allow this adaptation or this recovery to happen, which will then allow you to cope with more load. It's the same with bending and lifting. It might be, if it starts to become a problem after an hour, we do 45 minutes, we rest for 15, we come back, we do another 45. So what we've essentially done is an hour and a half of lifting without any pain. So we're building the endurance just by building in this little piece of rest, which is allowing the tissues to recover, to potentially adapt, so on and so forth. So it's very much looking at this principle when it comes to rebuilding the core, rebuilding the back muscles, rebuilding the lower back, rehabilitating lower back pain. So this will be, if you come onto the online course or the online course and coaching, this is one thing that will be brought into that that rehab plan if it's needed. So again, we'll go through the consultation and assessment, we'll assess and understand what needs to happen, and then we'll put in place what needs to happen, and this could be a part of it. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Chris for Whole Training. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.